in the heart of a city built by fortune and fame, one of the wealthiest families in the world faced a crisis no amount of money could solve. Amara Langston, young, radiant, beloved, lay silent in a coma. Doctors from across the globe had tried. Machines buzzed, experts debated, but nothing could reach her, until one day, someone unexpected walked through the hospital doors. He had no credentials, no appointment, no shoes, just a torn hoodie, a soft voice, and a strange kind of calm. Security tried to escort him out, but he looked them in the eye and said, "She called me." They didn't believe him. Why would they? He was just a homeless boy. But what happened next would leave the world in awe. A tear on her cheek, a heartbeat shift, a melody whispered through sterile halls, and before anyone could understand what they were witnessing, he was gone. Some called it a miracle, others called it madness, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. This is the story of the boy who woke the silent. They say a city reveals its soul in contrast, the steel towers scraping the sky, and just beneath them, human lives folded into corners. On one side, billion-dollar views and glass walls. On the other, shivering bodies curled in alleyways, wrapped in silence the world refuses to hear. In this city, wealth wasn't rare, compassion was. Langston Medical Tower stood in the wealthiest district, sleek, sterile, and flooded with the finest technology money could summon. It was a place where even the air seemed controlled. No chaos, no clutter, no color, and no cure, because inside the top floor of that fortress of innovation, a millionaire's daughter lay still. Amara Langston, known across the city not for her money, but for her kindness, was now a silent figure in a private hospital suite. She had raised voices for the voiceless, walked beside the homeless, and funded shelters with her own hands. Yet now, despite all the power and privilege surrounding her, she had become powerless. The coma came without warning. No crash, no illness, no explanation. One moment she was alive with laughter, the next, doctors stood around her bed in quiet disbelief. Outside the world kept spinning, inside time slowed. Her father, Devon Langston, had built an empire on logic, control, and strategy, but now his empire couldn't buy healing, couldn't fix what science couldn't explain. Experts arrived in waves, equipment was flown in, monitors blinked, data streamed, and theories circled, none with answers. Some whispered words like neurological anomaly, others leaned into terms that sounded clinical but meant the same thing: we don't know. The silence in Amara's room was louder than any siren, and outside, whispers began. News stations caught wind of the story. A young woman beloved by many, daughter of a tech mogul, brought down not by illness, but something stranger, something unknown. The pressure built. Reporters camped outside. Headlines spoke of desperation cloaked in wealth, but inside the tower, behind closed doors, the Langstons weren't reading headlines, they were losing hope. One by one, even the most confident specialists walked away with shoulders low and eyes dim. The very room designed for miracles was becoming a monument to futility. But just a few blocks away, under a rusted overpass, another child waited. Not in a room, not on any schedule. He was not listed on any hospital record or known to any medical team. He had no money, no credentials, and no voice in that building. Yet he had already heard her, and something inside him said, "Go." But why would a boy with nothing believe he could reach the girl everyone had already given up on? Before the coma, Amara Langston had become a rare contradiction in her world: wealthy, but reachable. Born into a name that could open any door, she had made it her mission to open doors for others. She didn't just give, she showed up. Soup kitchens, street clinics, foster centers. She saw people society refused to see. Her voice was warm, her presence magnetic, and despite her last name, most who loved her didn't do so because of her father's empire. They loved her because she made them feel human. That's what made the silence so devastating. Devon Langston, her father, had always been distant, not cruel, not harsh, just focused. He built tech that reshaped cities. He spoke on stages across the world about logic, data, and control. But as he sat beside his daughter's bed, watching the monitors flicker with no meaning, he saw a battlefield he couldn't command. He wasn't losing a daughter, he was realizing he never really knew her. His wife had passed when Amara was just 6. Since then, Devon buried himself in success, believing money was protection. He thought he'd given Amara a future, instead he'd missed her present. In the corner of the room sat Elijah, Amara's uncle. He had never left. Where Devon was marble, Elijah was warmth. He'd helped raise her. He knew her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she'd hum when nervous. He remembered her joy, and it was that memory that he clung to now, like a rope in a storm. Elijah prayed quietly each night, not to fix what science couldn't, but to keep her light from fading. Still, even he was beginning to crack. Hopelessness has a way of bleeding into even the strongest hearts, and every time a new expert entered with confidence, then exited in silence, Devon's shell hardened. He stopped taking calls. He ordered media blackouts. His fortress mentality returned, but this time, it was fear he was hiding behind. Even Elijah couldn't reach him anymore. What the world saw was a tragedy wrapped in luxury. A billionaire, powerless, a daughter, lost, a hospital suite filled with machines, sterile light, and the sound of waiting. Yet outside the headlines, behind the images and interviews, something deeper was breaking. The fragile threads that once held a family together. And not far from all this silence and sorrow, a boy walked the edges of the city. No name in any paper, no history anyone bothered to record. Just a quiet child with a strange kind of presence, and eyes that carried something ancient. His story hadn't begun yet, but when it did, every story in that hospital would change. Who was he? And why did he believe Amara could still hear him when no one else could? The official diagnosis was nothing, not brain damage, not trauma, not any known neurological disorder, no seizure, no stroke, no infection, just stillness. Her heart was steady, her brain was active, but she wasn't there, not really. The doctors called it a non-responsive consciousness, a phrase as empty as it sounded, but Elijah called it what it felt like, absence. Devon Langston, on the other hand, responded the only way he knew how, by throwing money at the unknown. Specialists from Tokyo, Zurich, Johannesburg, cutting-edge researchers, neural interface developers, sleep state psychologists. One by one they arrived with answers, one by one they left in silence. Then came the machines, artificial intelligence diagnostic panels, quantum response simulators, even a controversial deep scan cognitive reconstruction system. None of them moved her. At first, Devon was furious. Then, quiet. Quiet was worse. Quiet meant he was surrendering. Elijah never left Amara's side. He kept a notebook at her bedside, writing down the days like they meant something. Sometimes he read aloud her favorite poems. Sometimes, he sang softly to her, songs she loved as a child. She never moved, but he swore. Sometimes a tear would form at the edge of her eye, as if a part of her could still hear. The hospital, once a fortress of sterile precision, began to feel like a mausoleum. Nurses walked softly. Even the most seasoned doctors avoided that room. It wasn't just that they couldn't help, it was that they felt watched, not by cameras, not by staff, by the unbearable silence. Meanwhile, the story escaped. The media got hold of it. A billionaire's daughter, vibrant and beloved, now trapped in a coma that defied every answer money could buy. Cameras gathered outside. Articles speculated wildly. Poisoning, spiritual possession, government testing. Devon's publicist tried to control the narrative. It didn't work. The world doesn't love mystery. It eats it alive. News anchors debated the limits of science. Talk shows booked miracle healers, claiming they could help. One man mailed a VHS tape, saying he had dreamt of Amara's awakening. Another woman claimed she was Amara in a past life, and could guide her back. Devon shut it all down. But Elijah, he started listening. Not to the madness, but to the feeling rising in his own chest. Maybe this can't be fixed by force. Maybe it has to be felt. And just as the media frenzy peaked, and hope began to rot into routine, a barefoot boy with a weather-worn backpack appeared outside Langston Medical Tower. He said nothing at first, but he returned, every day, waiting, watching, until someone finally asked him, "Why are you here?" And he answered, "Because she's waiting for me." Was he delusional? Or was there something in his silence that knew more than all their machines combined?
Hope can be loud at first,
But when it dies quietly. In the early days, Devon Langston answered every silence with strategy. No expense was spared, no voice ignored. If the world had a specialist, he brought them in. A neurogeneticist from Sweden, a consciousness researcher from South Korea, a Swiss team experimenting with brainwave remapping. One man claimed he could revive cognition using deep-frequency algorithms. Devon flew him in on a private jet. The results? Nothing. Not even a flicker. Then came the alternative methods. A so-called energy healer from Cairo, a priest from the countryside of Italy who had performed rituals on children said to be trapped between worlds. Devon let them in, out of desperation, not belief. Still, Amara remained as she was, still, silent, untouched by science, untouched by faith. Each new failure wasn't just a disappointment, it was a fracture. The more they tried to pull her back, the further she seemed to drift. Some began to suggest letting go. One doctor even dared to speak the word acceptance. Devon fired him on the spot. The staff, once confident and clinical, moved with quiet tension now. They whispered in corners. Some said Amara's room felt heavier, not in weight, but in absence. Devon stopped giving interviews, he stopped answering emails, and eventually he stopped sleeping. For hours, he'd sit by her side, eyes hollow, replaying the last conversation he had with her. He couldn't even remember what it was about. Something simple, meaningless, but now it was everything. Elijah noticed it all. He saw Devon breaking, but also retreating, inward, cold, obsessed with data, clinging to control in a world that refused to be controlled. So Elijah began writing. Each morning while Devon stared at graphs, Elijah wrote in a small notebook. Memories, dreams, Amara's favorite quotes, songs they used to sing in the car. Anything that reminded him she was still more than a hospital bed and a diagnosis. He wrote for her, he wrote for himself, and maybe, for something he didn't yet understand, because in the stillness, something was beginning to shift, not in the machines, not in the science, but just outside the gates of Langston Medical Tower. A boy had arrived. No one noticed at first. He was small, quiet, barefoot, wrapped in an oversized hoodie 2 sizes too big. He sat beneath the awning of the emergency entrance. Beside him, a cardboard sign written in smudged black marker. I can help her. Security laughed. Nurses told him to leave. He said nothing, just stayed. He returned the next day, and the day after, through rain, through cold, through silence. Why would a boy with no home, no power, no voice believe he could do what no one else could? Some breakdowns don't look like chaos, they look like silence. Elijah noticed the change in Devon long before anyone else. It wasn't the shouting, the slammed doors or the late-night calls to foreign labs that gave it away. It was when he stopped speaking to Amara altogether. He no longer held her hand. He no longer whispered that everything would be all right. He just stared, as if waiting for a command from a machine instead of a miracle from his own daughter. Devon Langston, the man who shaped cities, was now a man without words. Elijah, meanwhile, was trying to hold something, anything together. He wrote more, longer entries, remembered smaller moments. The chocolate stain Amara once left on his car seat, the way she always stood on her tiptoes when talking to children, just to meet them at eye level. The stories she told of wanting to build a center where nobody had to prove their worth to be helped. Elijah filled pages as if his pen could reach her. He didn't know if it could, but what else did they have? And outside, the boy returned again. This time he brought something new, a small wooden figure, roughly carved, a little lopsided. It looked like an angel, or something close to one. The nurses started talking. He hasn't left in days. He sings sometimes. Humming. Well, not really humming. More like praying. I saw him crying yesterday, just sitting there looking up at the top floor like he knew her. Security still told him to go. He didn't argue. He just stayed. Elijah watched from the window. The boy was always there, right at the edge of the property line, where hospital authority ended, and public space began. One afternoon, Elijah had enough. He walked out past the revolving doors, through the reporters and the noise, and stood in front of the boy. Why do you keep coming here? He asked, not unkindly. The boy looked up. His eyes were dark, not from dirt but from depth, like someone who had seen things no child should see. Because, he said, voice quiet but certain, she called to me, not with her voice but with her soul. Elijah froze. The weight of the words didn't come from volume, it came from their certainty. What's your name? Isaiah. That was all he said. Then he looked back up at the tower, toward Amara, and in that moment, Elijah didn't know whether to call it faith, madness, or something even more mysterious. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something move inside him. Could this boy really hear what no one else could? Elijah didn't tell Devon about the boy right away. He wasn't sure Devon would hear him, and even less sure that he'd believe him. But Elijah started watching, closely. Every morning Isaiah returned. He never asked for food, never begged, never once sought attention. He just sat, sometimes with his head bowed, sometimes with his eyes fixed on the hospital's upper floors. One night, as Elijah walked past the main window overlooking the plaza, he saw something that stopped him. Isaiah, barefoot, drenched from the rain, was sitting cross-legged in the center of the courtyard, singing. The melody wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. Even the weather seemed to retreat. It was haunting, pure, a lullaby Elijah hadn't heard in years. Amara used to sing it at bedtime. Her mother taught it to her. Elijah pressed his palm to the glass. His throat tightened. The boy couldn't have known. The next morning, Elijah walked outside again, notebook in hand. That song, he said. Where did you learn it? Isaiah shrugged, soft-spoken. I didn't learn it. I remembered it. Elijah sat beside him, on the pavement. He didn't care who was watching. Have you seen her before? Amara? Not with my eyes, Isaiah answered. But I've known her for a long time. Elijah didn't question it. Not this time. Something about the boy's voice didn't allow for disbelief. Over the next few days, Elijah began sharing stories with Isaiah. Small things. Amara's dream of building a place called Voices at Dawn, a haven for people who felt unseen. The time she gave away her shoes to a girl in the rain and walked barefoot through the city. Isaiah listened, silent, like every word mattered. And the longer Elijah spoke, the more he realized, this boy was absorbing more than just stories. He was remembering her, somehow, like her spirit had already met him, long before her body ever needed saving. Inside the hospital, something was shifting too. The nurses said Amara's breathing patterns were changing, a faint tremble in her fingers. Nothing definitive, but it was there. And always, outside the window, Isaiah, still, waiting. Elijah no longer questioned his presence. He welcomed it, because deep in his heart he felt the connection forming, not just between Isaiah and Amara, but between belief and reality. Something was waking, but would Devon allow it? Would the man who built his world on proof be willing to place his hope in a boy with no answers, only faith? What would it take for a man who trusted machines to believe in a miracle? It wasn't the cameras that broke him, it was the questions. Why isn't she awake yet? Have you considered alternative treatments? Is your wealth failing you now? Devon Langston stood beneath the press lights, jaw clenched. They wanted emotion. He gave them fury. We've done everything. Every possible thing, he said, voice like steel. I don't owe anyone an explanation. Later that day he fired a senior physician for simply hesitating. If you can't give me results, get out of my sight. The media twisted his grief into scandal. Headlines fed off his desperation. He pulled tighter into himself, stopped speaking to Elijah, rarely went into Amara's room. Elijah had seen many forms of hopelessness, but this was collapse in disguise. It looked like control, but it felt like surrender. One night Elijah entered Devon's private office, no appointments, no warning, just the rawness of someone who'd held in too much for too long. We need to try something different, Elijah said. Devon barely looked up. I've tried everything. You've seen it. This isn't your daughter. Elijah didn't flinch. No, but she's yours, and she's still in there. I believe that. Devon finally met his eyes, cold, exhausted. What are you suggesting? A pause, a risk. There's a boy, a homeless boy. He's been coming here for weeks. Devon's stare sharpened. You're not serious. Elijah stepped forward. He's different. He knew things. Things about Amara he couldn't possibly know. He's not asking for attention. He hasn't asked for anything. He just waits, and every day he comes back. Devon let out a bitter laugh. A child with no training, no explanation, claiming to feel her soul. That's where we are now. Yes, Elijah said. Because everything else has failed. All your experts, all your devices, all your answers. You want control. I want a miracle. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, agonizing. "What if this ruins her chances?" Devon asked. "And what if it's the one thing that wakes her?" Elijah replied. "What else do you have left to lose?" Devon looked away. For once he had no argument, only silence, and in that silence, he finally said, "Fine, but no press, no staff, no one knows." That night, after hours, Isaiah was brought in through the side entrance. Nurses whispered. A few resisted, but Elijah was firm. "He's not here to perform, he's here to help." And as Isaiah walked down the hallway toward Amara's room, something stirred, not in the machines, but in the air itself. Was this a final act of desperation, or the beginning of something the world couldn't explain? The room was quiet, not because it was empty, but because something sacred was about to happen. Devon stood near the door, arms folded, jaw tight. He didn't speak, he barely breathed. Elijah sat in the corner, notebook forgotten in his lap, and in the center of the room stood Isaiah, small, still soaked from the rain, the same oversized hoodie, the same weathered shoes, if they could even be called that. He said nothing at first. He just stepped gently to Amara's bedside. His eyes met hers, not in a medical sense but in a way that felt personal, like he knew exactly where she was. He knelt, and then, without any cue, without any instruction, he began to sing, soft, steady, familiar. Elijah's heart jumped. It was the lullaby, the one Amara's mother used to sing when she was little, the same song Elijah once heard Isaiah humming outside. Devon looked confused. "What is that?" he whispered. Elijah didn't answer. He couldn't. The song filled the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't impressive. But it was true. It carried something no machine could measure, something even faith couldn't fully name. Then, something happened. A flicker. One of the monitors spiked. Not dramatically, but enough. A number jumped. A light blinked. Devon stepped forward. What was that? The nurse, watching from the hallway, covered her mouth. "Her vitals just shifted," she whispered. Elijah rose slowly, eyes wide. Isaiah didn't stop singing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small hand-carved figure, the angel he had made, rough around the edges, shaped with more hope than skill. He placed it gently on Amara's chest, and then, a tear. A single tear slid down from the corner of Amara's eye. Devon saw it. So did Elijah. The machines weren't lying. Something had changed. Isaiah looked up, not at the machines, but at Amara. "She's listening," he said. Not a question. A fact. The room held its breath. No one moved. No alarms. No charts. Just a moment that felt completely outside of time. Devon whispered, "What are you?" Isaiah stood slowly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He turned to leave, his footsteps silent against the tile. At the door, he paused beside Elijah and leaned in close. "She'll wake when she's ready," he whispered. "But she's not lost." Then he stepped into the hallway, walked past the nurses, and disappeared around the corner. Was it belief that moved her, or something no word could define? For a long time after Isaiah left, no one spoke. The machines, usually so monotonous in their rhythm, now felt alive, not erratic, not chaotic, just subtly different, responsive, attentive. Elijah watched Amara's chest rise and fall, slower, like something within her had been stirred, nudged. Devon checked the monitors 3 times before finally turning away from them, for once not trusting the numbers. Instead, he looked at her. "She hasn't moved like that in weeks," he said under his breath. Elijah nodded slowly. "It's not proof, but it's something." On the bedside table, the small wooden angel Isaiah had left remained still, carved with uneven hands. Its wings were misshapen, the face barely visible, yet something about it made the room feel, not brighter, but warmer. A nurse came in to reset the monitor, her steps careful. She didn't say anything about the boy. No one did, not officially, but the whispers had already started. Who was he? Did you see the monitor spike? He just walked out, like he was never here. Later that night, Elijah found Isaiah's note, folded carefully, and left under the notebook. "She remembered me. I just reminded her who she is." No name, no contact, just those words. Devon tried to brush it off. He called for another scan, more data, another round of testing. But even he couldn't deny the change. Amara's heart rate had stabilized.
The brain scan showed subtle increases in response. A warmth had returned to her skin. Coincidence, he muttered. But he didn't sound convinced. Elijah didn't press him. He just stayed at her side, whispering the same lullaby Isaiah had sung, believing it still echoed in her memory. And somewhere in the city, Isaiah walked alone once more. No celebration, no headlines, no crowd, just another nameless figure in the night. Yet something had shifted. Not just in the hospital, but in those who had witnessed what happened. Not science, not magic, something else. A boy no one knew had stepped into a room where the greatest minds had failed, and left behind more than a carved token. He left behind possibility, and in a world starved of wonder, that might be the greatest gift of all. Was Isaiah a prophet, an angel, or just a child whose belief was stronger than anyone's understanding? Do you believe it was faith, or something else?
It happened quietly, not with alarms, not with a crowd gathered around. Just a subtle shift in the silence. On the third morning after Isaiah's visit, the nurse assigned to Amara's room entered to check vitals. She was mid-sentence with a colleague when she froze. Amara's fingers, still for weeks, had moved. First a twitch, then a slow curl. The nurse leaned in, calling her name. "Amara? Can you hear me?" And then her eyelids fluttered. A full 3 seconds passed before they opened, slowly, deliberately, as if her soul had remembered how to return to her body. Elijah was the first to reach her bedside. His voice broke. "Baby girl?" Her lips moved. At first no sound, then soft, barely more than a breath, a line from the lullaby, the same one Isaiah had sung, the same one her mother used to sing when she was little. Devon stood frozen at the doorway, unable to speak. His world, the one he had tried to control through technology, wealth and certainty, had just changed, in a way he couldn't explain. Doctors rushed in, scans were ordered, the monitors buzzed with fresh data, but no one had answers. "There's no neurological cause for this kind of delayed response," one said quietly. "Not like this. It's—" He stopped before saying impossible. Elijah didn't need a chart. He just took Amara's hand and whispered, "You came back." Her eyes turned to him, weak but clear. "I wasn't alone," she whispered. "Someone was with me, holding my hand." "Who?" Elijah asked. A pause, then, "A boy. I don't know his name, but he had kind eyes." Elijah nodded slowly. "His name was Isaiah." Amara blinked. A tear escaped her eye. "I remember him." Word spread like wind. Within hours the media was circling again. Cameras reappeared. Reporters outside the hospital were now asking new questions. How did she wake? Was it medical, or something else? Who was the boy? But when they searched, they found nothing. No security footage, no hospital log, no ID. Isaiah, who had walked boldly through the building that night, had left no trace behind. Some said he was never there. Others insisted he was something more, a prophet, an angel, or a miracle in disguise. The hospital remained silent. Devon refused interviews. Elijah, when asked, simply said, "Some things aren't meant to be explained, just felt." Was it the boy's faith that reached her, or was it Amara's own belief, buried deep in the silence, waiting for someone to answer it? The world wanted answers. The hospital gave none. Headlines churned. "Millionaire's daughter wakes, without medical cause." Where is the boy named Isaiah? Miracle or myth? The more they looked, the less they found. Hospital security pulled every angle of every camera. No entry, no exit, no boy matching Isaiah's description in any visitor log, security feed, or hallway footage. Staff were interviewed. Some admitted they saw him. Others denied it entirely. A few whispered that maybe he was never really here. One nurse described him as the kind of presence you feel before you see. Another said, he looked like he belonged in the room, like he'd been there before any of us. Conspiracy theories erupted. Some believed it was a spiritual awakening. Others claimed it was a staged redemption arc for Devon Langston. But Devon had already stepped away. 3 days after Amara opened her eyes, he resigned from the board of his tech empire. No press conference, no statement, just a handwritten letter sent to shareholders and staff, expressing gratitude and regret. He wrote, "For years I built things meant to outlast me, but none of it compares to holding my daughter's hand when she finally squeezed back. The man who once measured life by data was now rediscovering it through connection. Devon pledged a fortune to launch 2 initiatives, one for neurological research, the other, to the shock of many, for shelters and resources aimed at homeless youth. He's trying to find the boy, Elijah told a reporter. Maybe not in name, but in meaning. Elijah's life changed too, but in a different way. He began speaking, quietly, then publicly, about grief, faith, and the mystery of healing, not as a preacher, not as an expert, but as someone who had seen the unseen. He told Amara's story, not with the goal of proving anything, but to remind people that even in silence, life is still speaking. People asked if the boy was real, he said once. I ask a different question: what made you stop believing he could be? Amara, still weak but smiling more each day, began therapy with full support. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her voice was soft but steady, and when reporters finally asked her what she remembered from her time in the coma, she answered with clarity, I wasn't in darkness, I was just waiting, and he came to sit beside me. Who? One reporter asked. He never said, Amara replied, but I think he was hope. Was Isaiah a boy, or the answer to a call Amara never knew she'd made? Rehabilitation was slow but steady. Amara Langston, once vibrant and constantly in motion, now moved with the deliberate care of someone who had seen what it meant to be powerless. But she wasn't broken. If anything, she seemed more whole. It's strange, she said to Elijah during a quiet morning session. It's like my body forgot how to move, but my soul didn't forget a thing. Elijah smiled. He'd grown used to her reflections, how she often spoke as though the coma had not been emptiness but space, not lost time but a waiting room between worlds. Amara began to open up more about what she'd seen or felt while unconscious. I remember floating, but not weightless. I felt held, like someone was sitting next to me the entire time. He didn't talk, he just stayed. That's what made me want to come back. Elijah listened, notebook in his lap. Did you see his face? She shook her head gently, not clearly. But I felt his presence, and I remember the way he made me feel, which was safe, like everything broken could still be made new. That afternoon she drew a sketch in her journal, a boy holding a small crooked angel in his hand. Beside it she wrote just one word, Isaiah. Devon, now quieter than he'd ever been, started spending more time with her. Not as a man with answers, but as a father learning to listen. He asked fewer questions, and when Amara told him about the boy in her dreams, the one who never spoke but always showed up, Devon didn't dismiss it. He may have done more for you than all my experts combined, he said. He didn't try to fix me, Amara said. He just stayed. That was enough. And so the Langstons did something unexpected. Together, Amara, Devon and Elijah, they founded a new center in the city. Not a clinic, not a hospital, but a space for those who felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten. They named it Voices at Dawn. Its mission wasn't to treat symptoms, but to offer presence, a place where no one had to prove their worth to be cared for, a place for the lonely, the lost, the hurting. In the lobby of the building stands a small sculpture, a barefoot boy carved from oak kneeling beside a girl on a hospital bed, in his hand a crooked wooden angel. Visitors ask who he is. Some say he was a messenger, others call him a miracle, some say he was just a homeless child with unshakable faith. But for the people who were there, those who heard him sing, those who saw that tear fall, those who held Amara's hand when she woke, he is legend. Was Isaiah ever meant to stay? Or was he only meant to arrive exactly when he was needed? Some stories don't end. They echo. Voices at Dawn opened its doors 6 months after Amara Langston woke, not with fanfare, not with cameras, just a simple ribbon, a plaque, and the presence of 3 people who understood why it mattered more than anything they'd built before. Devon Langston stood quietly beside his daughter. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't prepare a speech. He let Amara speak. This place isn't here to fix people, she said. It's here to remind them they matter, even when they feel forgotten. The center was simple by design, open spaces, quiet rooms, soft lighting, a place where homeless youth could find rest, support, and above all, connection. Medical care was provided on site. Counselors and volunteers from all walks of life came through its doors. But what set Voices at Dawn apart wasn't just the service,
It was the spirit. On the far wall hung a small plaque, in memory of the boy we never really knew, but who reminded us who we are. They never included his last name, not because they didn't care, but because they never found one. No school record, no birth certificate, just the name he gave, Isaiah. And the moment the world couldn't explain, his story became something more than fact, a spark, a shift, a whisper through the city that maybe miracles weren't rare, they were just overlooked. Elijah became the center's voice, speaking weekly to anyone who came seeking more than shelter. His talks weren't sermons, they were stories. He came with nothing, Elijah would say, but somehow gave us everything. People ask if he was a prophet, he once told a room full of kids. I don't know, maybe he was just someone who didn't need proof to believe. Across the city, rumors grew, a boy helping a runaway near the riverfront, a stranger placing a coat over a woman on the church steps, a voice singing a lullaby near the city bus depot. Was it Isaiah? No one could say for sure, but they told the stories anyway, because some truths live better as legends. Amara kept a small wooden figure by her bedside, Isaiah's angel, worn, unpolished and irreplaceable. When people asked about it, she'd simply smile and say, it was carved by someone who knew what hope felt like. And outside, in the world they tried to fix, change was quietly happening. Not through institutions, but through people who had once felt forgotten, now remembering their own resilience. Was the boy an angel, or simply a reminder that the smallest presence can carry the greatest light? Legends aren't made by noise, they're kept alive by memory. Isaiah never gave another sign of his whereabouts. He didn't show up at Voices at Dawn, he never came back to the hospital, but the city began to speak his name like it belonged to something older than paperwork. Stories surfaced from every corner. A night security guard at an abandoned transit stop said he saw a boy sitting beside a shivering teen. When the guard approached, both were gone, but a crooked wooden carving had been left behind. A local vendor swore a barefoot child helped pull an overdosing man from behind his food stall, and when help arrived, the boy had vanished. At a youth shelter across the city, a teenage girl claimed someone sang to her when she was about to give up. He didn't speak much, she said, but when he looked at me, it felt like I wasn't invisible anymore. Most brushed off the stories, but to those who knew, those who had seen the impossible, they felt like whispers of destiny. The city didn't just remember Isaiah, it responded to him. Devon's donations helped open 2 more centers, each focused on healing through human connection, not bureaucracy. Former patients volunteered, business owners contributed quietly, kids who once lived in tents found shelter, food, safety, and more than anything, they found someone who listened. Some of them had never even heard of Isaiah, but his spirit lived in the walls of every room he helped inspire. Elijah often said, we used to call him homeless, but now we call him home. He would pause, then add, not a place, a presence. Amara began journaling again, not for therapy, but to remember. She wrote poems, letters, pieces of dreams. In one entry she wrote, there was a moment when everything inside me went quiet, and then I heard a boy singing, not with a perfect voice, but with love, and when he stopped, I realized, I didn't want the silence anymore. One of her poems hangs in the hallway at Voices at Dawn. He never shouted, he never shone, but somehow he lit the way home. Not everyone believed, and that was okay, but to those who had nothing left, Isaiah was more than a child. He was a reminder that even when the world says you're powerless, your presence can still carry transformation. He became more than memory, he became movement. Was Isaiah just one boy, or was he the beginning of something we've all been waiting for, something unseen, something felt, something worth passing on? In a world rushing to be heard, Isaiah chose to listen. He never demanded attention, he never explained himself, he simply showed up, again and again, until someone finally let him in. Elijah stood on the rooftop of the original Voices at Dawn Center, looking out over the city Isaiah once walked through barefoot. In his hand, the same notebook he carried during Amara's coma, now full, he opened to the last page, wrote just 2 words. He stayed. Then he looked into the camera, tired, wiser, softer. He reminded us of something we'd forgotten. Elijah said in a voiceover, slow and steady, that miracles don't come from machines, they come from hearts, from stillness, from showing up when no one else will. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Amara now helps run Voices at Dawn. Her steps are lighter now, her laughter more deliberate. She greets each child by name, kneels when she speaks to them, just like Isaiah once did for her when she couldn't even speak back. Devon funds the centers, but he rarely stands at the front anymore. Instead, he walks the halls, talks to staff, listens to stories, learns. "I built an empire on logic," he once said, "but my daughter was saved by love I couldn't quantify. That taught me more than any stock ticker ever did." The legend of Isaiah still flickers across the city. Not everyone believes, but every once in a while, someone will report seeing a boy at a bus stop, a small figure kneeling beside someone who's hurting, a carved angel left behind, and no one ever catches him. No one ever needs to, because the truth of Isaiah was never about proof. It was always about presence. A final note appears on screen, white letters on black. "You're not lost, you're just not finished yet." A quiet pause, then Elijah's voice once more. "The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more Isaiahs. So if you're waiting for a sign, this might be it." A final soft fade to black. Do you think Isaiah was real, or do you believe he was something more, something sent not to be explained, but remembered? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and if someone you love is lost right now, maybe they're just not finished yet. Like, share, subscribe, not for clicks, but for connection.